This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
You hear a bump in the night, or at least you think you did, something that keeps you awake, something moving just at the corner of your eye until you look in that direction. What is going on? Who do you call to find out what exactly is going on? You call your friendly neighborhood PhD is what you do. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Joining us for what's becoming an annual, not becoming, it is an annual tradition here in the bunker. Even though we are on bunker number 5 now, as you can see, we are now in the barn. It is still a work in progress, as you can see by the space, the unfinished space behind the screen there. But we're getting there. We're getting there. We're using it to work, and we are thankful to you for making it possible. A Build Barn Better update coming up after the break. But joining us now in what is now a tradition that goes back more than a decade, the author of Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim, and Senior Fellow of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, our friendly neighborhood PhD, Dr. Judd Burton. Judd, this is our 11th, but we've done this every year since 2014.
Yes.
Which I guess means we're getting old.
We're getting older, yeah, exactly. As if the salt and pepper in my beard is not a reminder of that enough, then yes. But 10 years, yeah. I'll never forget the first time we had, I think the first time I was on your show, we talked about vampires and werewolves.
And I think that was back around 2008.
I think,
and then we did a Halloween episode around 2010, but then starting in 2014, it became sort of an annual thing.
Yep. That's right. You're right.
So, well, you talk salt and pepper. I look at the pictures of the color of my beard when we moved out here to the Ozarks in 2015. It is completely changed, like the changing of the colors of the leaves on the trees here in the Ozarks at this time of year. So
exactly.
But that is perfectly all right. As is always the case here in the bunker, all of my good ideas are actually Sharon's. Credit where it's due. She's the one who suggested this. As I was thinking, okay, what are we going to do? Because we've discussed vampires, as you said. We've discussed werewolves. We discussed golems and Frankenstein and other things. And on the Iron and Myth series with our friends Brian Godawa and Doug Van Dorn, we talked about demons and ghosts and devils and other things. So what else is it? Sharon's like creepy dolls. Like, okay. And as we're discussing this, a new film just out for the Halloween season is kind of a new artificial intelligence enhanced take on this with Megan as an AI doll protecting a little girl, perhaps a little too well. But we can run this back through all kinds of films like the Chucky series or Child's Play series featuring Chucky, the evil doll. The little Stephen King thing with the little monkey that claps his cymbals and never goes away. But this is actually an idea or a concept that goes much farther in history than just the Hollywood era.
Mm-hmm. Quite so. Really, the fashioning of icons and figurines and images is really kind of if we're looking for an ancient anchor for that subject of creepy dolls. Its origins are prehistoric. In fact, that's probably where we should start, is sort of in the context of idolatry, because that is essentially kind of where I suppose the animation, if you will, of such things begins. As this sort of spiritual charging of objects, whether they represent gods or supernatural forces or what have you. A lot of that, of course, is coming in the wake of large-scale animistic religion, where people believed that their gods weren't necessarily anthropomorphic or zoomorphic, for that matter, that they were simply forces of nature. The kind of generic term that anthropology borrowed from Polynesian culture is mana, this kind of
Hmm.
impersonal, supernatural force. And so,
Okay.
go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
it just a light bulb was going off here. There was a series of stories that I read by science fiction author Larry Niven years ago. That he was kind of a hard science fiction author in the vein of like Heinlein or Asimov, but Larry
mhm,
Niven had a series featuring a main character called the Warlock, in
mhm,
which the world existed surrounded by this force called mana, and I
mhm,
didn't realize that he had drawn that from the Polynesian
mhm.
religion.
Yeah, it's sort of like shaman. The word shaman, that's a Siberian word, but it's become a generic term for those sorts of religious professionals, in the same way that mana has sort of become a word for this impersonal supernatural force in
Hmm.
anthropological circles or general humanities, social sciences sorts of things. Uh, but it, when scholars would probably argue that when people begin to conceptualize their gods uh, as human or zoomorphic, is when we start to see these kinds of figurines and statuary start to show up in the archaeological record. But if we're looking at it through the biblical lens, then it it's more likely that it's after contact with such beings, uh, these fallen celestial beings, that they begin to render these kinds of icons. Um, Now, one of the earliest of them is the classic Venus of Willendorf, which was first recovered from a site in Austria, and it's, I say, iconic, not to be not to be ironic or poetic, but this is the classic mother goddess figurine, with she's clearly pregnant. Um, Her breasts are enlarged. They're typically headless, but these are amongst the not the earliest anthropomorphic renderings, because we have pictographs and petroglyphs and cave art, things like that are older. Most of the Venus of Willendorf figurines date on the early end. Some people would date it for about 40,000 years ago, anywhere between 40,000 and 25,000 years ago. It's kind of the window that you're going to find them in, towards the uh, kind of the closing of the Paleolithic era. Um, but she represented the sort of ultimate or ideal divine feminine. Clearly, there are these fertility ideas that are sort of engendered in the figurines. But what's interesting about them is the breadth of territory that you find them across. You find them all across Europe. They've even been found in the Middle East, um, parts of the Asian continent. So their distribution is pretty widespread. So this idea um, is 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 pretty pervasive early on uh, in the sort of the germinating seeds of polytheism, about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And since the rearing of crops and the cycle of death and rebirth, it was all tied up in that, and the uh, human cycles of fertility, animal cycles of fertility, all of that is sort of tied up in this imagery, and provides a window into um, the earliest objects rendered into human form with supernatural significance. Um, so all of those ideas that previous millennia generations had held about animism, um, take on a new form. And I would argue, and I think that a lot of people in our circles would argue and agree with, is that this comes in the wake of contact with these fallen supernatural entities who are revealing, gradually elements of the transdimensional and the supernatural, if you will. But I
So
think
they come to Earth
that's
and they
really,
start interacting with they come to Earth, start interacting with us humans, and encourage then the use of these uh, um, avatars, if you will, little clay
Mhm,
avatars to
mhm.
represent them, to give them locality when they're performing whatever rituals they've been encouraged to perform for the fertility of the crops, the fertility of the family, and so on.
Yes, yes, and that locality is very interesting because that is another corruption. When a demonic corruption, when um, by way of contrast, when we become believers, when we accept Jesus Christ, um, we become sacred space. Our bodies are again and again, referred to as temples after that because God dwells in us. We become sacred space. Well, that is sort of turned on its head, very much in line with the stratagems of the demonic. That gets turned on its head in idolatry, where you've got these representative figurines and statuary being occupied in some sense, charged by the supernatural, charged by the demonic. Um, so there's another classic example, and one that had to have been initiated early on in the early phases of this contact, because it's a tradition that not only becomes more widespread, but it continues throughout time. And in the wake of things like the Venus of Willendorf, of course, you have all kinds of male and female representations of the divine and the semi-divine. So our first creepy dolls are really Paleolithic in nature, and they become more ornate and in some cases abstract, and in some cases, with regard to the human form, quite realistic. But their underpinnings all stem from this root and this contact between these fallen entities and humanity.
There, there's a type of creepy doll, if you want to call them that, that have been found in and around ancient Uruk and
Hmm.
ancient Eridu, which
Hmm.
was remembered by the Sumerians as the first city where kingship was first lowered down from heaven. In fact, I just discussed that with Doug Petrovich here a couple of weeks ago.
Yes. Hmm.
The Ophidian figurines, or the reptilian,
Serpent-like.
or the
Hmm.
right. They're clearly bipedal, and
Hmm.
they're doing things that you would typically associate with mammals, like a mother nursing an infant. But they are clearly, again,
Hmm.
scholars call them Ophidian, which means snake-like. But
Hmm.
what I mean, if say the Venus of Willendorf was inspired by these supernatural entities, the Elohim or Watcher class entities that came down and commingled with humanity,
Hmm.
what inspired those?
Well, that's my point exactly. Is you look at these serpentine figures from, and I believe the stratigraphy is Ubaid level, the
Yes,
very
exactly.
oldest levels of places like Eridu and Uruk. Um, so that puts us in the middle and the late Neolithic period. So
Hmm.
these are very ancient, very archaic things. They represent contact. I would argue post flood, but still early on in the historical timeline, um, or at least the late prehistorical time. But looking at this through the lens of the Bible, um, people are going to pick up on that there are seraphimic qualities
Ah,
to these serpentine figures out of these Ubaid levels in Mesopotamia. Um, so, yeah, what did they look like indeed? And I think that there's a clue to that when you run it back through the biblical material, and the of course the accompanying apocryphal material as well, where we find commentary on these kinds of entities, that their skin is iridescent and almost like a reptile. So yeah, I would fall on the side of categorizing those as some sort of fallen seraphim.
That's very interesting, and I agree with you. As the late Dr. Michael Heiser pointed out, there are a couple of places in the Old Testament where the word Nakash, usually translated serpent, but most famously the serpent in Genesis chapter 3, which was clearly not a talking snake. Mm-hmm. Nakash used interchangeably with seraph, the singular form of seraphim. So Nakashim, seraphim, the flying fiery serpents encountered by the Israelites in the desert when they rebelled and, caused Moses to have to put up the bronze serpent on the pole. So yeah, I like that word seraphimic. I'm going to borrow that.
There were some strange things that they ran into in that section of Exodus, isn't there?
There is, and there's an interesting prophecy, if I remember correctly now, and I want to say Isaiah 14 toward the end of that chapter that seems to suggest, and I may be thinking of the wrong chapter, but let's see. Rejoice not, O Philistia, which is rather timely given what's happening between Israel and Hamas as we're recording this. Rejoice not, O Philistia, all of you, that the rod that struck you is broken from the serpent. For from the serpent's root will come forth an adder, and its fruit will be a flying fiery serpent. I don't know that that's... Yeah, there you go. This was the year that King Ahaz died in Judah, so this I'm not suggesting necessarily now that this is prophetic and about to be fulfilled in Israel, but just pointing to that area in the south of Israel, the Negev, where they encountered these entities. There seems to be, because I know there's another verse, and I'll have to find it. I wish I'd known we were going here because I'd had it right at hand. But something about that area in the south that connects to these serpentine beings. I will probably search for it again as you're talking here.
Well, and there may be, the Amalekites ambushed them in that same region in the Negev, sort of before they come into Canaan, and the Amalekites are. Interesting linguistically when you tear down the name, because it contains the LK, the transliterated English LK morpheme, that second syllable, or what is it, a third syllable, is the same one that you find in the Aluka, which is another of the vampires that's referenced in Proverbs chapter 30. It's usually translated as leechworm, but there is a camp of scholars that contend that it's related to a vampire-like creature. And literally the name Amalek, the Amalekites, it means the blood drinkers or the blood lickers. And this initial contact doesn't go so well. And Moses, as you'll recall, sets up an altar. He's directed by Yahweh to set up this altar. And Yahweh tells them, you need to hunt these people down. You're basically, I'm paraphrasing, but you're going to be, this is Deuteronomy chapter 25. Basically, you're going to be in a kind of ever war with these people, but you need to blot out their memory. Because, of course, they continue to fight the Amalekites for some time after that, even in the occupation. But it's interesting that there's some later Jewish commentaries that say that the Aluka, there's interesting linguistic relation here, but the Aluka is also a shapeshifter. So we're on a tangent here. I get that. We'll bring it back to creepy dolls, but just to point out the high strangeness of what's going on in that episode, between the escape out of it, the leading out of Egypt, and the entrance into Canaan.
Right. And I found that verse that I was thinking of. It is Isaiah, but it's Isaiah chapter 30, verse 6, an oracle on the beasts of the Negev, and that word translated beast is behemoth.
A behemoth.
Yeah. Through a land of trouble and anguish, from where come the lioness and the lion, the adder and the flying fiery serpent. And that is the, me'opep, which means flying, but the fiery serpent is nakashim and seraphim. They carry their riches on the backs of donkeys and their treasures on the humps of camels to a people that cannot profit them. Egypt's help is worthless and empty. Therefore, I have called her Rahab, Leviathan, who sits still. So you've got Leviathan, Behemoth, and the flying fiery serpent in that reference in Isaiah 30, verse 6, which is very, very bizarre. But let me take this route through back to the creepy dolls. We had an opportunity to meet with an Israeli archaeologist, Dr. Mike Freakman. In fact, I shared an image of you, a picture that he'd sent me just the other day as we checked in to make sure he was okay in the early days of the fighting in the war. And he sent back a picture of him. He's been called up in the reserves. So here you've got an archaeologist, probably 40 years old or close to it, who's now out there guarding a community, I presume, in the north. He didn't identify where he was. But anyway, as we spent a day with him in the Golan Heights, looking at Gilgal Rephaim and the serpent mound of Bashan, which is, as long as we're on the subject of serpent and serpentine creatures and worship, he pointed out that in that region, in the Chalcolithic, the Copper Age, which is at the end of the preceding the end of the Neolithic, just preceding the Bronze Age, on the Golan, they found representations of animals that appear to have been used in a sort of magical working, as though the spirit of the animal was in these little creatures, because they've got ibex and water buffalo, which used to inhabit the region between the Sea of Galilee and Mount Hermon in what was at the time the Hula Swamp or Hula Marsh.
Yes.
These things would be, apparently, we don't know for sure because this is in the era before the invention of writing, so we don't know exactly what they were used for, but it appears that they were used in some sort of apotropaic, if that's the correct word, apotropaic worship or ritual, where they would smash or stab, they would stab these figurines before they would go out to hunt. So it's like the animal is already dead, it just doesn't know it yet, because the spirit of the animal is in this little figurine that I've created here. So that kind of gets us back to where we were with the spirit inside these representations of animals or humans. Absolutely,
yeah. And in the academic study of magic, there are two main categories. One is contagious magic, and it very much as the name suggests, this has to do with using implements that were in contact with whatever your desired end. So, the implementation of human hair and fingernails and bodily fluids and things like that have historically been used in contagious magic. The other is imitative magic, and an example of that is what you just pointed out. According to Freakman's research, you're imitating literally the desired outcome. So this was something for the hunt that was being done, and it's the consequently the subject that we're talking about tonight. The creepy dolls. Probably the most popular outside of cinema and TV and literature would be the voodoo dolly,
right?
That a lot of people are probably familiar with. That's an example of it can be both imitative and contagious, because sometimes hair and fingernails and things like that are used, but it's always done to imitate the desired effect. And the idea here is that you're creating a proxy for the victim, whatever you want to inflict on them. And of course, this practice can be seen in any number of cultures, not just in the Afro-Caribbean religions of of the Caribbean, like voodoo and candomblé and Santeria. They're variations on a theme. You even see this in to a certain extent in curanderismo and some of the more northerly Latin American countries. Um, Gosh, when I lived in the Rio Grande Valley, there were curanderos down there that had shops, in the downtown square. So this sort of practice is still very much alive and well. Um, but as you can see from the distance between the time of the Chalcolithic, and of course there are certainly older examples of this in the archaeological record, but just by way of illustration, just from the provenience of the find that you're talking about, uh, according to Friedman's research, and the modern usage of the voodoo dolly and its analogs, um, clearly this has been something that's been at play for millennia, for as long as we've had contact, and have been impacted by these fallen celestial entities and their progeny.
This is, and what we've discussed to this point is the use of these dolls to manipulate the spirit realm into getting what we want. We want a successful hunt. We want to grow our family. We want fertile crops, whatever. We want to impress the gods, whatever. Typically, as they're used in Hollywood, it's the other way around. It's the thing. This thing is possessed by a spirit and is doing stuff you don't want it to do. Like Chucky in the Child's Play series, or Jigsaw in the Saw movies. Yeah, just. And of course, Megan, if I'm understanding what I've seen in the trailer correctly, this AI infused, or is it AI that really empowers this doll to do things you don't want it or her to do? Is that a thing? I mean, is it possible for inanimate objects, or objects that we assume to be inanimate, to be possessed by a spirit?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would argue yes. One of the examples that comes to mind is the Raggedy Ann doll that that Ed and Lorraine Warren found, that I think was associated with one of the houses or cases that they were investigating. That seems to be a pretty good example of something being charged and possessed by a spirit. And I also have a rather horrific tale to recount, and I'll keep it anonymous because it involves a personal friend of mine. But a friend of mine from when I used to live in South Texas, and she had a friend who was an art collector, and I mean, just a voracious collection, and he had a lot of statuary from different places. Some of it was genuine antique articles. Others were facsimiles. They were modern reproductions. A lot of indigenous art, a lot of tribal art. Well, he passed away fairly recently, within the last month and a half or so, couple of months, I think. But as my friend, as she was telling me about all this, one of the things he had done before he died, he had ordered a dolly from a tribe in Africa. It was part of a guy's collection, as I understand it. And as a collector himself, he would have had the connections, to do that. So he orders this doll, which, again, according to the collector and the story that's attached with it, contained the spirit of a witch. And when he received it, he found on inspection that it had hair and fingernails, I believe, as part of the, and that there was a prohibition that the previous owner had given, not to, dismantle it or take it open or whatever. He told him something like the spirit within it would be released. And he had, I believe he had to take it apart to a great extent to find out that there was hair and nails as part of the makeup of the dolly. But he got very ill in the wake of that, and had reported to this friend of mine that he had seen a vision of this witch. Like it was extremely lucid, like she was there. All these horrific visions of a gnarled, demonic, vaguely African-looking witch, and the spirit tormented him for days and weeks, as it turns out, apparently, and he died a number of weeks after that. And the apartment that he lived in has since had 3 occupants, and they've all died under mysterious circumstances. I cannot help but think, as I prayed and advised my friend, I cannot help but think that this statue, this dolly that he ordered from his collection, had something to do with it. That seems more, I don't see coincidence at work.
Well, I know that the late Russ Dizdar had often talked about charged objects and being very wary of accepting gifts, especially if he didn't know where they came from, things that would just show up at his office anonymously. He would pray over them and oftentimes just refuse to accept them or dispose of them. And I had talked with another gentleman, a deliverance minister from the UK years ago. Michael Cummins was his name, who said that he bought all of his clothing. I think I mentioned this on a previous Iron and Myth program, mentioned that he bought all of his clothing at resale shops because you don't go into deliverance ministry to make a lot of money, but he made sure to pray over his clothing after he got it back from the shop, because he'd had a bad experience once with an illness that after he brought home some clothing, and finally after some prayer and fasting determined that there was something attached to one of those garments that he brought home. So it sounds, for people new to the concept, it almost sounds like something from a Hollywood film. And I will say that, had I heard this 25 years ago, I probably would have said, yeah, this is just psychological. It's made up. They were convinced something was attached to it. So they behaved as though it was real. But I've met too many rational, productive people who say, no, this is a real thing, to dismiss this out of hand, which is why, when we did our Iron and Myth program on, that topic, I showed the little gift that my daughter had sent, the keychain, which I keep here in the office as sort of a joke. The Cthulhu keychain that she sent me for Father's Day without letting me know it was coming. And so it showed up from an address I had no idea where it came from. And and I just interviewed Russ Dizdar. So he prayed over that, and then she called on the phone and said, so did you get the Cthulhu keychain? Oh, okay, that was you. The Raggedy Ann doll that you mentioned, by the way, if I remember right, that was featured in one of the Conjuring films, which is loosely based on the careers of Ed and Lorraine Warren, kind of a redheaded doll. They may have given her more of a like a ceramic head than the Raggedy Ann, but it was the same sort of thing. So if you've seen the Conjuring films, which I think we discussed those during our program on horror fiction as a teaching series. The Conjuring films came up during that discussion, and they're actually fairly well done and actually show which is kind of rare in Hollywood films, Hollywood horror, the power of the gospel and the power of Jesus Christ in overcoming this supernatural evil, which is not great theology, but at least it's better than what you generally get when Hollywood tackles this kind of issue. So these, I'm just really interested because I had never connected the idea that, the creepy doll, kind of a Stephen King trope. You can never get rid of it. You throw it away. It keeps coming back. It's carrying a sharp, pointy object, whatever. But connecting it to the idea of the image, you use that word early in this discussion, which is a word that's used in the Bible of these idols that are created to give locality to the spirit realm. So again, bringing this back to that and to the Bible. So what we're really looking at here is not that far-fetched when you consider that that's what the purpose of images were, these dolls were, these idols were in the Old Testament, was to give a place for spirits to reside when you wanted to communicate.
That's exactly right. And the strangely enough, it would seem that, almost anything, could be that, just as long as it's within a ritual space. Some of the, there have been, and you could argue that Ouija boards are charged almost immediately, in the course of their manufacture.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it would seem that, something even as innocuous as as an article of clothing, or as you say, a gift from an anonymous donor or something of that nature. But the idea that idols or statuary, or homes, or temporary holding vessels, temporary places of occupation for the gods, for spiritual entities, for celestial entities, seems to be a concept that runs throughout the concourse of this idea. And it from one end of the Bible to the other, really, because even in Revelation, we're told about the image of the beast, the which implies a kind of statuary.
Mm-hmm.
As a locus for the demonic, a very specific kind of the demonic in that case.
Yeah, that's until we dug into the book of Revelation deeply, Sharon and me, with our series Unraveling Revelation, I'd always assumed image to mean, like a video or a photograph or something, not realizing that the word in the biblical context actually represents an idol, and then understanding that what that idol is. It's not a block where a block of carved wood or stone that you pretend has life to it. It's sort of a tuner or a radio receiver for the supernatural that gives locality to this entity. So yeah, when you're talking about the image of the beast, you're not talking about an AI looking at you through a screen. It may be some sort of 3D representation that is worshipped like a statue, or who knows? Maybe it is animated, an AI animated caricature of something, but that is more likely what is being described, and that is not all that far from what we're discussing here. The Hollywood horror trope of the creepy doll. It's again, with Halloween coming up in just a couple of days from when we're going to release this program, Judd, just to touch on that for a few minutes before we close. I think a lot of children just look at this as a way to dress up and have some fun. How do we, as parents or grandparents, looking at the culture around us? I think Halloween, you can make a good case that it is the second most popular holiday here in the United States, the Western world, after Christmas, and for some of us, it's even more popular. But how do we then address this with our children so that they begin to understand that there's more going on here at this season and with this holiday than just a chance to play dress up?
I had fairly recently, I had somebody ask me in the Blurry Creatures homeschool page. They've got a bunch of homeschoolers and they have their own group, asking me if I had a
Good
curriculum for yeah, exactly. If I had developed a curriculum for young people, to talk about these kind of things. And I said, well, I've had ideas about it, but I guess I'm going to have to develop a curriculum now. But I mean, it really starts with giving kids a sound, age appropriate instruction on these concepts, so that you know, it's it's difficult as a kid to distance yourself from what is presented to you as just innocent fun, because no kid wants to be left out,
Right.
of that. Um, but the older I get, the more sanguine I feel about distancing myself, according to the admonishments in the New Testament about even the appearance of evil. And my suggestion, again, is that parents do this early on, introduce these concepts early on to kids. And, you know, the solution for helping kids not feel left out is to get with other families who have kids, who have also been instructed, in the danger of these kinds of things, the danger of this sort of imagery. And there are
Right.
plenty of things to celebrate during this time of the year. It's the harvest. Harvest imagery is about as innocuous as you can get. It doesn't have to be about ghosts and demons and vampires and zombies and werewolves and stuff like that. Because again, if you introduce these concepts in an age-appropriate way, to kids, they pick up on it. They'll understand. And if they have people to bond with their own age, they'll feel left out. But that's not to say that it's not a challenge, because since the 19th century, really even before, going back to the 17th and the 18th century, Halloween has been such an ensconcement in our cultural landscape that it's so difficult to combat without first submitting to God and then taking some of the suggestions to heart that I've outlined here. But yeah, the key is to start early and develop strategies for kids to have fun as an alternative to what's going on. They're all
Things
again,
like a lot of churches with the trunk or treat celebration instead of
sure.
the occult themed decorations and parties that are present in a lot of our schools and even our churches.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I know, growing up in the church that I grew up in, they always had a fall festival, with lots of games and stuff for kids and candy and all of that. So there's a way to go about it without interfacing with all of this, after all, quite disturbing imagery that's given the glaze of normalcy during the Halloween season. So, it's I think there's good advice from Sir Christopher Lee about all this. The only reason that Sir Christopher Lee ever played Dracula is he insisted in his contract that Dracula be killed every time, because he was the villain, he was the enemy, he represented the satanic. Lee was, to his credit, was very, very explicit about all of that. And so I think, again, as long as those fundamental ideas are driven home early on, then there's even a proper way to look at those images and assess them. And so, if I'm going to dress up as anybody during Halloween, it's going to be Professor Van Helsing, or
That's it.
maybe I'll shave and go as Fox Mulder or something.
Amen to that. Judd Burton, his website is burtonbeyond.net, not .com, burtonbeyond.net. And we look forward to just a couple of weeks out coming back with our friends Doug Van Dorn and Brian Godawa for another edition of Iron and Myth. Judd, thanks for your time tonight, and hope you enjoy the season in an appropriate way, the Van Helsing way.
That's right. I should add in closing that that long-awaited book is just around the corner. I'm finishing up the last edits that have been going on for several years now. It seems like all my books are half finished and quarter finished.
I know the feeling. Working on that now, but looking forward to reading the Van Helsing Way when that's ready. Judd Burton's website is at burtonbeyond.net. Used to be .com, but now it is .net. Update your contact list accordingly. Coming up, a couple of things. First of all, I want to give you an update on the Build Barn Better project. So you can see a little bit more of the building here. That'll follow the break immediately. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, bless her pointy little head. A view from the bunker. More straight ahead.
Everybody, believe it or not, this is October, and that means you get a brand new GHTV special offer.
We're approaching Halloween, the time of year when the world around us is focused on ghosts and goblins and devils and demons.
But they're real.
They're real, and we'd like to give you good information about those entities with our October special. First, our book Veneration, where we analyze the ancient cult of the Nephilim, the origin of demons exposed in this book. Vicki Joy Anderson's important book, They Only Come Out at Night, about night terrors and sleep paralysis.
You need this book at home for your kids and grandkids. Trust me, it is a great book.
And 7 hours of audio interviews with the late Dr. Michael Heiser about the nature of the unseen realm.
Oh, this is a collector's disc.
It really is. Altogether, these 3 items purchased separately worth $65 during the month of October, just $35 plus shipping and handling. Take advantage of this because this is good, solid, scholarly information, especially the content from Dr. Heiser.
It is, and particularly this month, you want to be armed with the truth when your family asks, what about witches? What about wizards? What about these things at Halloween? What do we do with this? It's a time to teach.
Absolutely. Take advantage of our October special offer. Veneration, They Only Come Out at Night, and The Unseen Adversary, yours for just $35 plus shipping and handling only at gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome to the barn. This is where we are today, a progress report as to how our Build Barn Better project is going. We're actually producing content here now. While the lights on the set are off at the moment, you can see this is the setup that we're using for the daily 5 and 10 news updates for Skywatch TV. Sharon has put this together with her artist's eye and has made this look really, really good for a minimal expense. Lots of flat-packed furniture, which as I get older, I'm finding is not as easy to assemble as it used to be. Those Allen wrenches are killer. Now, you may notice up above the paneling here that the spray foam insulation is still showing. There are 2 reasons for this. Number one, it's not going to show on camera. But secondly, and probably more important, it acts as sound baffling, which is a real help to us when we're trying to record video. In the small room we were using for Unraveling Revelation, previously, the echoes from the small room and the smooth walls was always an issue. In here, that's proving not to be a problem, and it's in large part because of the irregular shape and the open cell of the spray foam insulation. So leaving the paneling at just its 8-foot height and then leaving the roof above us open to show the insulation actually knocks down the echoes in here and helps with the audio quality. Here in the corner, we've got the 5 and 10, not the 5 and 10. This is the view from the bunker area, also the video editing area, where I work on the 5 and 10 daily updates, also our Unraveling Revelation programs, our travel log. Basically, all the video gets edited in this station here. And a special thank you to our good friend Lynn Shepard, who's been helping me assemble all of this flat-pack furniture. Again, as I mentioned, not as easy to assemble once you get past a certain age. So that has been a real blessing. She has been a real blessing to us in helping us to put this together. Now, as you pan to the right, you'll see the area that will become the Unraveling Revelation studio. This is still a work in progress. We've got 1 bookshelf assembled. The other one will be going up later this week. The furniture in here, you'll notice extra chairs because we are praying for the opportunity to talk with guests who come to the Ozarks about Bible prophecy, about the times in which we live, just allowing us the opportunity to perhaps expand and do more things with guests on Unraveling Revelation. We've got a podcast area that we're going to set up yet for our weekly PID radio podcast, our weekly Gilbert House Fellowship Bible study. And what we'll do with all of the space in the middle of the floor here is still to be seen. I mean, obviously, we need to get the boxes out of here. So as we continue working to assemble this space, again, as you noticed, some of the walls do not yet have paneling on it. The paneling is here. Our contractors, David and Barbara James, Christ Powered Construction, they have been working on other projects for people with greater, more immediate needs than us, but soon the paneling will be going up on the walls to finish out the look inside. And again, as time allows and energy allows, and as the Lord leads, the rest of this space will be turned into useful space for video and audio production. And this has all been made possible by your generosity. We would not have been able to do this without you. And so we want to say thank you. That's the reason for this update, just to show you the progress that we've made through your support of our project to build Barn better. Again, we thank you for making this project possible, because this really gives us a lot more flexibility to do video and audio projects, record presentations here, perhaps even small gatherings, interviews, and so forth. A view from the bunker will continue to come from this location, although we may dress the set a little bit behind me. Nothing too fancy, just enough to make it a little more interesting on the eye, I suppose. Unraveling Revelation will probably begin recording just the other side of that screen in sometime in November, I would imagine. And again, it is all because of your generosity that this is possible, and we truly, truly appreciate your support. Not to reiterate too much, but I want to make sure that if you're listening and not watching, that we remind you that the October special that we are offering, which is our book Veneration, Sharon's and mine, our deep dive into the Rephaim, Vicki Joy Anderson's book. They only come out at night on sleep paralysis, night terrors, and how to deal with that spiritual attack. That and the 7 hours of audio interviews with Dr. Michael Heiser, that $65 value, $35 plus shipping and handling, that's been extended through the month of November. And I'm sure it's all because of Vicki's book, which is excellent, highly recommended. And in fact, she's living in the area now, she and her dad. So we're going to have to get Vicki here into the barn and get some more interviews, more discussions with Vicki out there, because not only is she a brilliant writer, she's a fantastic researcher, and she's got some hands-on experience in dealing with these sorts of supernatural attacks. So some really valuable information, and we want to make that available to you, which is the whole reason for this space, to make it easier for us to get this stuff turned around. Well, you know, of course, that as of this recording, and I'm doing this a little early, recording this section of the interview on Tuesday, October 24th, because I'll be away the weekend. By the time you're watching this on Sunday the 29th, I should be back home from the Pitchfork and Hoe gathering in North Dakota, Valley City, North Dakota. First time I've been in North Dakota in 45 years. I pray that I'll be back by now. I'm looking at the forecast. Somebody sent me a note the other day and said, you're just in time for the 6 to 10 inches of snow. Excuse me? We've had snow here as late as April here in the Ozarks, but generally, when you get snow in the Ozarks, it's 1 inch to 2 inches. We're more likely to get freezing rain and sleet than we are to get large amounts of snow. I grew up in Chicago during a period of time back in the 70s when we got a lot of snow. I remember the big snow in Chicago of 1967, but we haven't seen that kind of thing here in the Ozarks. A couple of times in the 8.5 years we've been here. So I am praying that between now and this weekend, that snow will shift off further north into Canada. Not that we wish anything bad on you, our neighbors to the north, just don't want to spend more time away from my wife than I've already agreed to. But anyway, as of this recording, the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas is in its, third week, basically. It is, by the time you see this, I'm almost certain that the ground war in Gaza will have begun. And that is certain to be a brutal and bloody affair. And I take no pleasure at all in saying that. one of the worst takes, and there have been a number of them. I mean, after the initial shock wore off, where I think all good people, all right-thinking people, condemned what Hamas did as an inexcusable act of terror, literally inhuman, because the God they serve is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is a God who is diametrically opposed to him, a God of death and the underworld. I believe that Allah is, in fact, Shemiyaza, or, if you prefer, the destroyer, Apollyon, Abaddon. I think that's who Allah is. Anyway, since then, progressives have bent themselves into knots trying to find a way to excuse what Hamas has done or to blame it on others. It's either Israel's fault, or in the case of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, it is the fault of American Christians. Seriously. She thinks apparently that it is our... And I'm trying to figure out how to get my head around this. She gave an interview just a few days ago, as I'm recording this, to Hot 97 in New York City, where she condemned Christian fundamentalists and Christian nationalists, which is, can I use the word dog whistle? That's a dog whistle for racist people who are giving Israel cover to do what Israel is going to do, and by the time you're watching this, is in the process of doing, I believe, in Gaza, in retaliation for what Hamas did on October 7th. Well, I'm trying to get my head around that, because on the one hand, she's saying that Christians are anti-Semitic. She did make that statement in that interview. Christians are often anti-Semitic, but at the same time, we're really, really pro-Israel. Now, she didn't say that she thought that fundamentalist Christians were believers in replacement theology. So I'm not sure she would even understand what that is. That's the belief that we Christians have replaced Israel in all end times prophecy. And so the Jews then are just to be eliminated and wiped out. But then if that's the case, then how is it that it's our support of Israel, because the people who live in Israel are, at least identify as Jewish? She said, well, okay, the Israel of today is not the Israel of the Bible. Well, yeah, that's fairly obvious. It's a mainly secular government. It is heavily influenced by the Jewish religion, of course. As our friend Avi Lipkin has said, the joke in Israel is that a government gets formed so they can determine which political parties have to make a deal with the ultra-Orthodox to run the country. And he's only half kidding. But in ancient Israel, it was pretty much a theocracy. Now, not all the kings were good kings. You had a few in there after David. Solomon, he built the high places for Molech and Chemosh and Astarte, who is Inanna, Asherah, Ishtar. We believe the woman who rides the beast in Revelation 17. Solomon, after that, it was pretty much downhill until you get to Hezekiah. There are a couple of good ones in there. Asa was not too bad. Then after Hezekiah, you get two really bad ones, Manasseh and Amon, who literally sacrificed their children to Molech, who again is, I believe, this entity worshipped by Muslims unknowingly is who Molech was in the Old Testament. Then you had King Josiah, who was the last good king of Judah, who reformed things. Of course, he died trying to stop the Egyptians from going to help the Assyrians against the Babylonians. And 25 years later, Nebuchadnezzar was destroying the temple. So the point is, we understand that Israel of today is not the Israel of 1,700 years ago or 1,600 years ago. But are you saying that would be better, AOC, or is that worse? I mean, are we wrong for defending Israel now or Israel then? Because the Israel of now is actually more opening and welcoming to progressive ideas. I mean, that's why they've had all these protests for the last 6 months. Judicial reform, to try to rein in the power of the progressive judiciary in Israel. Tel Aviv is one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world. The annual LGBTQIA plus parade in Tel Aviv is one of the biggest, certainly the biggest in the Middle East. But try taking that Queers for Palestine sign to, Beirut or Gaza or Mecca or Tehran and see what happens. I mean, this is just more proof. The AOC made no sense with their statement. And it's just more proof, or more evidence anyway, for my theory that being progressive means you never, never, ever suffer cognitive dissonance. They are completely capable of holding fundamentally, diametrically opposed ideas inside their heads without their brains exploding, which any rational, intelligent person, that should not be possible. So, Alexandria, bless your pointy little head. Well, as I said, back from North Dakota by now, I pray. And coming up, we've got just a virtual event between now and the end of the year. That is Skywatch TV's Defender Virtual Conference. Details on that coming up, obviously, with the loss of Dr. Tom Horn just very recently. Things are in flux a little bit. So we'll give you details as soon as we have those on the forthcoming Defender Virtual Conference. The artwork is done, the launch date was set, and then the things just kind of, had to take a lower priority. So that is coming up before the end of the year. Next spring, at this point, we are still planning to return to Israel March 31st through April 9th. Optional 3-day extension to Jordan. Details at gilbertsinisrael.com. But as we keep an eye on the situation in Israel, we will, of course, evaluate. And if it looks like it will still be a war zone by next spring, obviously we will postpone. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to watch or listen wherever that may be. If you're watching at YouTube, God bless you. And then please take a moment to download our free mobile app. That guarantees we will never be canceled. There's likely will come a time, or I should say another time, when I say something that gets a strike or perhaps just yanked, this channel yanked altogether. If that should happen, if you have our app on your smartphone or tablet, you will continue to receive all of our content, as well as access to an audio Bible with multiple translations, a calendar of our upcoming events, and a group messaging app, a section within the app where you can communicate with like-minded believers, talk about these programs, exchange prayer requests, pray for one another, and so on. We've even got sections there, questions for Derek, questions for Sharon. If you want to throw something our way, we can try to answer. All of that is available on our app, iOS, Android, Amazon, Kindle Fire phones and tablets. It is free, and we've got links at our website, gilberthouse.org/app. Our announcer is the inimitable DC Good, and A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House Ministries, released under Creative Commons Attribution, not commercial, no derivatives, 4.0 international license. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.